This is the jointer. It's a surfacing machine that helps us to flatten faces and edges. Here in my shop, we have two jointers. This is the white Cantech, and then our other jointer is the yellow Powermatic. Okay, let me show you some of the features on the jointer. We have a really long in-feed and out-feed table that help us to make our materials flat. Down here, we have our on and off buttons. We've got our blade guard that covers our bladed teeth area. We've got a fence that is typically set to 90 degrees, but it can be adjusted. We can also adjust the position of the fence for wider or narrower boards. We also have our height adjustment on our in-feed table that allows us to adjust our depth of cut. Okay, so let's talk through some of the safety on the joiner. The joiner doesn't have a normal blade. It has a cylinder of bladed teeth. So as a board passes over those bladed teeth, it removes a thin layer of material on that board as it passes onto the outfeed table. So we want to keep our hands and fingers at least 2 to 4 inches away from this blade guard area. We definitely want to be careful on the jointer. Our depth of cut is typically set to 1/16 of an inch. We shouldn't be cutting more than a 1/16 of an inch off on our face and edge jointing. On the jointer, your board needs to be at least 12 inches long. It needs to be at least 1/2 inch thick. And as far as the width goes, it just depends on which jointer you're using. This is the larger of the two. And so just based on the width of the in and out feed tables, you can joint up to about 11 or 12 inches in width on the joiner. When we're face jointing, we definitely want to use a push stick, push block, or platen as we pass over that bladed area. If we're edge jointing, then it kind of depends on the width of our board. If it's high enough above that blade guard that we have our margin of safety, then I may just run it by hand. Or it's always a good idea to just use a platen or a push stick to help stay safe. For specialty cuts, we can adjust the in-feed table to a depth of cut more than a 1/16 of an inch, but typically we just leave it at a 1/16, and we never want to adjust the outfeed table. Okay, so let's talk about how to actually use it. Here I have a board that still has its rough faces and edges from the lumber mill. And as I lay this down, even though it seems mostly flat, I know that it's not perfectly flat yet. So we want to flatten it, the face, and then flatten the edge so that those meet at 90 degrees. So the first thing I do with my board is I'm going to test for flatness, and I do that by kind of touching the corners and seeing if it rocks back and forth. This side actually is quite flat. As I flip it over, I'm going to try this side. This side does have a little bit of rock to it. So check each side, and typically the side that seems flatter to begin with is the side that you want to place face down as you're running through the jointer. Now that I've decided which face I'm going to use, I've got everything set up. I've got my platinum push stick close by, and I'm ready to face joint this. I'm going to turn it on, and as I pass this board over that bladed area, it's going to remove a 1/16 of an inch, and it should also visibly clean up the grain that I have here. Be sure to push your material all the way past the blade guard area and then retrieve it at a safe distance over here. So now I am visibly have a better looking face, but I also can check on our table again, and this is totally flat. Another trick that you can do is if you use a pencil, and just draw a line across your whole face. Then, as you pass it over the jointer, if that line disappears, that's a pretty good indication that it's nice and flat. So let's see if we can get that line to disappear. So as you can see, we've removed our pencil mark, and this face is clean and it's also flat. So our next step would be to do an edge. When I'm going to joint an edge, I take that clean face that we just surfaced and I'm going to place that to the fence. I'm going to make sure, regardless of where it wants to sit, I am going to focus on keeping my face tight against that fence. That ensures that I'm actually going to be cutting at 90 degrees. It's important to make sure that you have a working and surfaced face before you do an edge so that you can reference that large amount of surface area as you're getting that clean edge at 90 degrees. This is high enough that I could just carefully tuck my fingers under and operate this by hand. But I'm going to go ahead and use a platen and a push stick. Anyway, my platen is keeping it tight to the fence, and my push stick is going to help me take it across. You can also, by looking down each edge, you can kind of see which one might look straighter. You could also test it on a table and see which one rocks more or less. And it's the same rule that typically you want to joint the edge that's rocking less. Unless there's another reason, if there happens to be a defect, then possibly joint the other side. It's totally up to you. Okay, we've got it set up. I'm going to turn it on and do a couple of edge joints. Again, I fed it all the way past my guarded area before picking it up. I want to make sure to keep my fingers away from that blade. It's visibly cleaner, and I could measure with a square to check, and I'm sure that's 90 degrees. You could also do our pencil trick again. If you make a little mark along that edge, if that pencil disappears, then that's a good indication that it's a flat edge. And then you can check it with a square for 90 degrees. So now I have a surfaced and clean face and edge, and they're both at 90 degrees. So I could take this board and continue milling it if this were part of a project. So I've shown you face jointing and edge jointing. I do want to mention that we would never want to joint end grain. Not only is it not safe, but you'll always get major tear out and chips on the end of that. So when we're surfacing or cutting our end grain, we use different machines, not the jointer. So that's the joiner. Please keep in mind all the safety guidelines and be careful as you use this machine.